So getting down to kind of the origin of Destination Truth, or the birth of Destination Truth, when did this idea for the show come up, and when were you contacted to take place in it?
It's a funny story, actually. The guy who started Destination Truth, which you probably know, Amanda, is this guy Neil Mant, who I think you've talked to in the past about Beg, Borrow, and Deal. And Neil is a guy he's a producer here in Los Angeles. He's worked with ESPN in the past, and he had come up with this show and pitched it to SciFi. It was sort of a different show when he pitched it. It was, it bore some similarities to the show as it is now, but it was a little bit different. And he pitched it to the channel, and the channel had been looking for something to put with Ghost Hunters. You know, Ghost Hunters is a real, in every sense of the word, hit show for Syfy. It does amazing ratings, and they've had a hard time finding something to put next to it. And this is before GHI came along and Ghost Hunters had been sort of franchised out. And so they had tried a couple of things alongside Ghost Hunters. They hadn't found things that worked, and he had pitched this show, which was similar to Ghost Hunters in that it was going to be about investigations and about looking into the unknown, but it was going to be more cryptozoological, and it was going to be more travel-based. And so they actually shot a pilot for the show with a different host.
Boo, I don't like that.
I know. And the channel didn't really care for it, and they felt like the tone of it was kind of wrong, and so they basically said to Neil, you know, we'd like to do a proper casting where we do a search and we try to find the right guy for this. And I had just known Neil through this ESPN thing that I did with him a couple of years before, but also I just sort of knew him socially here in L.A. We actually lived in the same building at one point. And he knew that I was just like an avid travel guy who loved to travel, and so he said to the channel, you know, I've got a guy that I think would be great for this. And they said, well, you know, we didn't like the other guy, so we want to do a proper casting. And he said, okay, but agree to meet my friend Josh. And they said, okay, we'll agree to meet your friend Josh. And while all this was happening, I was overseas with a couple of buddies of mine. This is a long story, by the way, I'm sorry. I was overseas with a couple of buddies of mine in Africa. And I had planned this big trip to go climb Kilimanjaro in Africa. And I was with two buddies of mine, and we were climbing, and I get this email. You know, I'm in the middle of Tanzania, and I get this email from Neil Mant in Los Angeles that says, come home, I have a great job opportunity for you. And of course, I'm like, well, I'm in Africa, I'm not coming home, and it's LA. People say things like that, right? So I finished up my trip, and I was headed home, and I emailed him back, and he said, you know, come straight to my office when you land. Don't even go home. Come from the airport right to my office. So I went over to his office, and I was all filthy and dirty, and I'd been in Africa for a month, and I stank, and my clothes were literally, it was just like I had this huge, horrible beard, and I had like a neck beard, and just like gross. Like I looked homeless. And I came into his office, and he said, you know, there's this show, and Syfy wants to do a pilot, but they're looking for the right guy, and I think he'd be great for it, but they've narrowed it down to some other guys from this casting, but I want you to go to the channel tomorrow for this meeting, and I want you to come just like this. Don't shower, don't shave, don't change your clothes. Come to this meeting looking just like this.
And so
I said, okay.
When you walked in, they're like, who let Gary Busey into our damn office?
Seriously, when I walked in, I thought they were going to turn me. It was super embarrassing, actually, because when I walked in, I felt like they were going to turn me away from the front door at Universal because I looked horrible. And I went into the waiting room at Syfy, which is up in this tower here in Los Angeles. It's kind of this tall building, and they're way up in the sky, and it's a kind of futuristic-looking office. It's a little bit intimidating. And there are these three other guys that they've narrowed it down to. And these three dudes are just sitting on this couch, and they're all wearing business suits. Like, they look great. They're all, like, game show guys. And I look like homeless Joe. And they called in, each one of these guys, you know, one at a time. And they finally, I was the last guy they called in. And I walked into this room, and there was a bunch of people in this room, more people than I had thought were going to be in there. And there's like 10 or 15 people, and Neil is sitting in there, and everyone kind of looks at me and kind of, you know, looks a little taken aback because I looked all grisly. And I said, listen, first of all, I just want to apologize about my appearance. I just got off a plane from Tanzania. And that was it. That's how you get a TV show, apparently, is you just have to look bad enough at the meeting, and if it's a travel adventure show, that's how you get it. And so they thought that there was like an authenticity about me that these other guys didn't have, and they agreed to do a pilot with me, which we shot in Malaysia, and that episode is sort of cycled into season 1. And that was it. That's how I got the job. I basically went in and looked really terrible at an interview, and that seems to have worked.
Well done. In this economy right now, I guess that's a good way to do it as well. Just go in with really tattered clothes and be like, I need this job. I can't.
Exactly. Well, I think it's probably job specific. If you're going in for a Wall Street position, I think probably the big beard does not work. But if you're going in for ragged World Explorer, I guess dress the part. That's the theme.